I'm just kidding. It's the Two Bros Wrestling Show. I'm actually Kevin, not Orange Cassidy, but it's Halloween. So we're doing a special Halloween show tonight. And I got the Orange Cassidy going on, but Doug, you have really outdone yourself. I don't know if this is maybe a Mickey James or perhaps a Quinn McKay kind of thing you got going on, but color me impressed. What? Okay, I'm not Orange Cassidy, and this is not actually Doug.
I'm not Doug. Hello, everyone.
A few weeks after having our very first guest on the show with David Poole, we have now our second guest on the show. This is my wife, Jerry, and my better half and everything, and she is helping me out by filling in for Doug tonight because for those who don't know, it is Halloween, and typically Doug spends Halloween out trick-or-treating where he dresses as John Cena, so hopefully he will be back after collecting his candy with us next week. So are you ready, Jared, to play the role of Doug?
I'm ready, and I'm surprised they still allow Doug to be around children. But
that's why he's in costume. That's why he goes as John Cena. He
goes as a prisoner every year, right? He just wears the prison costume.
You have nothing to worry about. Just say the words AEW and Tony Khan repeatedly throughout the broadcast, and then just feign ignorance to everything else. And so you'll pretty much have the role filled.
Thanks. Well, I'm happy to be here, and hi to Bros Nation. It's really great to be here. So I think we're going to start off. Let's do some news and the opening bell.
Oh, she's seen the show. She knows how it's done. Wait for it. There we go. Before we get to our main event topic, which tonight is, Jerry, what's our main event topic about?
Well, the main event topic is about, appropriately for Halloween, blood.
We're talking blood. But first, we had that opening bell, which means we start with news, and there is a lot of news to report this week. We're going to lead the night with really earth-shattering news in the world of professional wrestling, and that is that Ring of Honor is in crisis. ROH announced on Wednesday that it is planning a pivot with a new mission and strategy, and that's going to require the company to take a hiatus for the first quarter of 2022. So the upcoming Final Battle pay-per-view is actually going to be the last scheduled Ring of Honor event. They, in their announcement, claimed this is going to be a, quote, reimagining of the Ring of Honor product, and that they will return in April, which would be in time for like WrestleMania, where they usually do their Supercard of Honor event. What wasn't announced in the initial announcement from ROH, but became clear in the days following, is that as part of this restructuring, all the contracted talent to Ring of Honor is being released. And in fact, some of that may have already been happening if you believe the social media of a lot of these wrestlers. But for most of the talent, those releases are going to come at the very end of the year. Sports Illustrated further confirmed from multiple sources that contracts expiring on or before March 31st are going to be paid out for the duration of those deals. But for any of these talent who have contracts that actually extend beyond March 31st, 2022, what's going to happen there is this is going to require Sinclair Broadcasting, which owns Ring of Honor, to have one-on-one meetings with these talent, probably to do some sort of buyout. So Ring of Honor Chief Operating Officer Joe Koff had further details on this when he was asked by a reporter, where he basically said that this is a situation where, because they are really a division of a larger corporation, that they are held to the same standards as every other division. So when there's cost cutting across the parts of the company, it affects all parts of the company. But obviously COVID is going to be, one of the things that they, put the blame on for this. But truthfully, there's a lot that can be unpacked with this. There's some mismanagement and just, competition, but there's a whole lot more to possibly unpack with this situation, and that's exactly what we're going to do on the Two Bros Wrestling Show. On our special edition we're going to have on November 28th, we're going to be dedicating the entire main event topic that night to the subject of Ring of Honor and the possible future, if there is a future for Ring of Honor wrestling. More information on a story we led with last week, and that was backstage issues with Charlotte Flair. Flair reportedly didn't just get into it with Becky Lynch, as we reported last week after that botched SmackDown segment with the title exchange. But PW Insider cited two unnamed sources who said that Sonya Deville, who also was part of that on-air presentation as the moderator, was mad enough to fight with Flair. And though Lynch's confrontation with Flair obviously got all the attention, being the star that she is, at least Lynch and Flair are now on different shows. Whereas in WWE land, Sonya Deville has an on-screen role as the authority figure on SmackDown, so it'll be interesting to watch the interactions between her and Charlotte moving forward. And it's also worth pointing out that unless WWE pivots, typically Survivor Series means champion versus champion, so Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair may be in each other's crosshairs here again in a few weeks. Hopefully by that time all of this will blow over. But the reports that have been coming out in the aftermath of all this is that WWE is extremely in a bind when it comes to the Charlotte Flair situation. Flair is big enough of a star and knows it to know that, she's a bit beyond reproach. No one's beyond reproach, I know, but she supposedly feels that she may be, because what do? Do they punish her? Do they let her go and just basically gift wrap her and send her to AEW where she can appear as a main event star with her husband? So, yeah, more to come on this, and more to follow, and hopefully this is the last we hear of backstage issues with Charlotte Flair. Last week, we also reported that West Coast fans were about to have some upcoming episodes of AEW Dynamite preempted in their markets, but that has been resolved. Tony Khan tweeted out this week that, in good news, that the TNT NHL games that are going to be on in the next few weeks are all taking place on the West Coast, which means the puck drop on those aren't going to be until 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. Eastern time, which means coast to coast AEW will be able to air live, and this, of course, is going to be greatly beneficial to them in the ratings, as it would be a big hit for them if the Mountain time zones and West Coast time zones were delayed and were airing later on in the evening. So this means now, after really a month of a lot of preemptions and moving to Saturday nights and things, unless something were to change, TNT's coverage of the National Hockey League is not going to bump Dynamite anymore for the remainder, really, of Dynamite's time on the network. Because remember, AEW is moving to TBS on January 5th of next year. So Dynamite back on Wednesdays live coast to coast. In other news, we have both cuts and additions to mention when it comes to MLW. A name you're going to be familiar with, Jarrett, the infamous Enzo Amore.
Oh, wow.
You probably haven't heard that one in a while.
Yeah.
The controversial figure is back and going just by Enzo, and he is signed with MLW along with Will Ospreay. If you're not familiar with Ospreay, he's one of the greatest technical wrestlers in the world, and exciting talent. So that's great news for MLW. Not so great news is the fact that while we have Ospreay, Enzo, recently Bobby Fish all signing with MLW, this week Mance Warner, Jordan Oliver, Buku Dao, Leon Bryan, and Beastman, who just debuted for the company at the last set of tapings, have all been let go. MLW has not publicly announced the reasons for the release, but the word is that the roster is being cut as part of an edict issued by MLW CEO Court Bauer to shorten the MLW events and probably just a cost save. As everyone else seems to be doing right now. So it was noted that there may be more releases to come. So this is another story we'll continue to follow. And then finally in the news, the last thing I'll mention is a story that really kind of ties into something that Doug and I talked about a couple weeks ago. And that actually last week on our show, we talked about AEW and its business model. Well, Eric Bischoff made news this week when on his 83 Weeks podcast, he said some things that ties in nicely to what we were talking about last week. And obviously, when you talk a billionaire propping up a wrestling promotion, AEW gets a lot of WCW comparisons, and fair and unfair. We made a lot of them ourselves last week. Well, apparently Tony Khan hears this kind of stuff when he goes out too, and when he hears these comparisons, and apparently said something when he was asked about WCW that did not sit very well with Eric Bischoff. And this is actually what Tony Khan said, and I quote, "If Ted Turner knew 1% about what I do about professional wrestling, WCW would still be in business."
Ouch.
That's an inflammatory statement, especially to the man who was writing those checks back in the WCW days, and it should be pointed out. Eric Bischoff has been extremely complimentary of AEW overall, and in fact has worked with AEW and Tony Khan. So for him to hear that statement, it definitely lit a fire underneath him, and he took Tony Khan to task for those. One, for just saying he should not be talking about something which he's uninformed on, and that he brought up something that we talked about last week on the show, and that's Ted Turner had a long history with professional wrestling and was a fan, and apparently Tony did not know that when he made those kind of comments. But then, of course, taking it one step further, Eric went on to point out to Tony that WCW and WWF at the time were going head to head. So for that period of time when WCW actually beat WWF in the ratings, they were doing so by every which metric you could possibly measure. And Eric points out that that's not the case with AEW. So this is when he levied the accusation at Tony Khan that Tony cherry picks his ratings data to make AEW look better in comparison to WWE than they really are. And it's not an unfair thing for him to note, because when you're looking at just a slice of the demographic, which is that key demo, and then you're comparing that key demo from AEW's Wednesday night show to WWE on Monday night, facing completely different competition. A good part of the year, Raw is up against football, which just kills in that demographic. And Eric was quick to note that, you don't hear Tony mentioning much about comparisons with SmackDown on Fridays. He's always, comparing Wednesday show to Monday's Raw show, but calls SmackDown on Fox being on broadcast and airing on Friday night, where your competition is much, much less. Those demographics and those overall ratings would not be such a great comparison for AEW. So not unfair points when you think about the things that Eric Bischoff said, but hopefully they can smooth out that relationship between the two of them. But very much a tie into what we were talking about last week. And Jer, that's the opening bell.
It's a lot going on in the world of wrestling, and it's
particularly that Ring of Honor stuff.
Well, that Ring of Honor stuff is interesting because they're that minor league to me that's always been it always reminded me of the old ECW days, where that was the guys who just worked really hard and were they're like the minor league, and you need that, and I do think that you need that from another outside organization that's not the WWE and maybe not even AEW at this point, but I think they serve their purpose. There's enough room in the wrestling stratosphere for them, but
that it is definitely getting more crowded, and so some of the space that they used to occupy and role they used to occupy has definitely been taken on by others. But Doug and I we'll do a deep dive on this, because I want to look on our November 28th show at where did some of these people go? Because suddenly, when you talk,
AEW can't hire everyone.
We talk releases a lot on this show. Coming in and goings, who's moving to Japan, who WWE dropped, and sometimes when WWE's done their layoffs, and we talk 10, 15 people, which is pretty major when they have that kind of this is everybody. This is everybody flooding the market. So there's just not a place for every one of these folks to land. So this could be a potentially huge story, and we will definitely get more into that. But with that, we can talk main event time.
We can go to the main event. So
blading, blood, gore, Halloween, spooky stuff. Blading, juicing, getting colored, gigging, whatever you want to call it. These are many names that are used backstage in the industry for the act of what we're referring to as blading. I think that's how it's most widely known. And that is, for those who don't know, spoiler alert, when you see blood, it's actually real blood. These men cut themselves.
I think it's those capsules, those little blood capsules. And
there's probably not a more common misconception held by people who don't understand the sport of professional wrestling than this one. You've been with me for a very long time. I'm sure when you have to defend your husband's love of professional wrestling, what's the first thing that gets levied against professional wrestling?
Oh my gosh, why does he watch it? It's so fake.
That word, the big F word,
the big F
word,
and
not the other F word, but in wrestling, the worst F word is that one of fake. The idea that somehow it doesn't hurt. Fake can be levied at any entertainment I mean, you could look at a movie and say that's fake. That's not really happening. TV show, that's fake. That's not really happening. Uh,
The athleticism, the you know the that part of it is not fake, and for a long period of history, there's been a very gory part of it, as you said, that has not been fake at all. So I'd love to hear about the history. Let's talk about the history of blood. How did they get started?
Well, it dates back actually much farther than I would have expected to the beginning parts of the last century. 1930s is when the we can trace it to, and a man named Kirby Watkins, who learned to wrestle in the Navy and then went on to make a name for himself as Sailor Watkins. And what he did was he would, cut himself, and when you mix the blood with sweat, it particularly in an area that's pretty easy to bleed, like the forehead, it creates quite a spectacle. So what you ended up with was audiences who were not used to seeing blood began to flock to the freak show of, look, it's blood. And again, it goes
Yeah.
back to the whole idea of fake. That's, you wanted it to look real, and for the longest time when they didn't act as if it was scripted, they really protected the business by pretending and one way you could show that it was real is like, if it was not real, would there be blood? And again, that gets to
It's
the
interesting.
misconception that most people have, because even people who, I can talk to about the fact that, hey, this is predetermined, this is scripted. If I tell them the blood is real, they look at me like I'm 12
Yeah.
years old again, thinking that wrestling is real. Like,
Yeah.
they don't. There's a lot of people that don't believe it, because outside of wrestling circles, the idea of they do what? Yeah,
Yeah.
they cut themselves open to bleed for your entertainment.
Just take a look at an older wrestler's forehead, and
It sounds rather barbaric.
it does.
I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it kind of is when you look at it. Like, why don't they use blood capsules? But that's not what they use. It is not that there wasn't blood before Sailor Watkins there started the process of physically cutting himself. Used to make it look real, they'd deliver a punch to the right spot. This is called busting open the hard way. Before they started using blades, they, would hit a man on the right spot of his brow, and he would begin to bleed profusely. And old wrestlers like Terry Funk and Harley Race were kind of notorious for being among those who, if you were a squeamish younger wrestler who didn't want to physically cut oneself, and you're wrestling with Terry, and you're supposed to get blood, Terry, hit me right here on the, and he would do it and cut you open for you, which is, a nice thing from
That's how,
the Funker.
that's how I got mine. Terry was Terry Funk. I never
Actually,
told
you
you
can
that.
you can speak to the. I mean, you had an incident, not blading, but the fact that the brow will bleed. You have a scar there, and that's kind of hidden in the
Yeah,
eyebrow.
it's right there. It's still sensitive,
You hit
but
a table, right?
yeah, I passed out one morning. I was probably 15, 16 maybe, and when I kind of came to and felt like I could pull myself over, sat on the chair and or at the end of my bed actually, and my mom I hear her just screaming and yelling, and I'm thinking, she comes in, she's, we're going to the emergency room, and I said, I'm okay, I just need some juice, and she says, you're covered in blood. And I had a mirror, full length mirror, and I scooted over and I looked, and I mean, literally, like it was like the Carrie movie. I mean, I just covered in blood, and I was shocked.
And that's
But
the
yeah, it
thing,
was
because you
that.
didn't realize how bad you were bleeding.
No,
That area bleeds really sensitively
profusely.
and without a whole lot of pain. So I mean, it is. You can see why that would be the spot that is most often chosen. It's not always the area that they bleed from, but 99% of the time, if you see blood in a wrestling match, it's going to be from the forehead.
Yeah, absolutely. And the scars are going to be there. So, so why do you think somebody would want to do that? If there's other options, and you could use fake blood and so forth, why would someone want to do it? Especially maybe given some of the health risks and so forth. So why do you think they do it?
Back in the day, it became so popular that, after Sailor Watkins started to do what he did in the 30s, by the time we roll around to the 50s, it's become commonplace. And the statement that was often the mantra backstage was red means green, and you would get a bonus. Most of these wrestlers at the time were paid per show, and whatever it was you were getting paid, you would get so much extra if you were willing to blade, to cut yourself and add some color, as they say, to the match. And the audience responded. I mean, you have to think, if it started in the 30s and it started to become prevalent in the 50s, these audiences were not used to seeing this sort of thing. And when they start paying their hard-earned money to come see blood, that's what you had to give them. And it became a money-making tool. A lot of the old school wrestlers, Luthez, some of the names from that time, were really, they were very derisive towards those guys who started to do it. And then you get to the 60s and it goes next level, because that's when you have guys like the original Sheik, Sabu's uncle, and Abdullah the Butcher, who take it to a whole new level of violence, really, into what, Abdullah with his fork and all that. It was really the start of what today we would call hardcore wrestling, which again, some of the old school guys or some real technical wrestlers, have a low opinion of. But it was a style that really was formed by those kind of guys, and it was based around blood and the concept of blading. But like you mentioned, there were real risk to this sort of behavior. In fact, Abdullah's transgressions was, the worst that he ever was reported with is famously a wrestler named Hannibal. That went by the name Hannibal. Devin Nicholson was his real name. He contracted Hep C from Abdullah the Butcher blading him without his permission. So he's out there probably cutting him open with the fork, which is what Abdullah was good to do. And a court actually awarded him a judgment of $2.3 million because of this. So there definitely have been repercussions based on, like you said, some of these risks.
I wonder how many have used that small bonus that they got to bleed for their medical care, as an outcome, considering especially that's not something that's
it could go wrong.
Offered. I mean, yeah.
There's the for those who haven't heard of the mass transit incident back in ECW's days, go look that up. I mean, it's a situation too where you had a kid making his first match, pretending he had more experience than he did, and because he didn't have experience, you're telling New Jack of all people, New Jack, go out there and cut the kid. And New Jack, more than cut the kid, he about killed the kid. And I mean, it could have been a really tragic situation there, because it can be dangerous.
It could certainly be dangerous in the sense that someone is obviously bleeding, and whether or not they're bleeding so much or so profusely. And then, of course, you've got the disease factor. Did it lessen during the 80s, during the height of the AIDS and HIV scare, the 80s, early 90s? Was there a lessening of blood?
Well, what you had was sort of an increase of blood in the 60s. And then, when I first became a fan in the 80s, blood was really prevalent. And I mean, I can remember, and this is going to sound maybe sadistic of me, but I bought all the Apter mags, as they were called, but the wrestling magazines that Bill Apter was the publisher on, and the ones that had the horrific gory covers, the ones with blood streaming down the face, or Abdullah sticking a fork in someone's forehead. I mean, the more gross the cover was, as a 12, 13-year-old boy, I wanted that. I mean, that's the one I gravitated to.
Their audience. Yeah.
That goes back to the red makes green. I mean, you put the blood on the cover, that's the magazine that's going to sell. So it was really, really prevalent in the 80s. If you go look at, at any of the old 80s wrestlers, especially the ones that were known for bleeding a lot, Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and Ivan Koloff, their foreheads look like road maps. So it actually was really prevalent in the 80s. Of course, then along comes AIDS, and the fear of AIDS is what caused, at the time, WWF to briefly phase out blading. But, when you have competition, and the competition's doing something and you're not, and they look cooler than you do, WCW, NWA slash WCW, as it would come to be, transitioned to, but they still bladed all the way up into the early '90s, at least on pay per view. You rarely
Right.
saw blood on TV, which is another reason that you pay your hard-earned money to go to the arenas or
Yeah.
order the pay per view, because you're going to see blood. And that cage match, is going to end and people, beating each other to bloody pulps, and you're going to see the real violence then. But blading, once it started to go out of fashion because of the contaminant risk, it became popularized again by a little renegade promotion with three letters that people like to chant there in Philadelphia, EC Dub, right? They glorified the
Right.
violence and the blood, and because of that, Vince McMahon, with the Attitude Era, brought blading back, and it stayed there in full force for a long while.
Gosh, you're talking about Flair bleeding, and I mean nobody bled like Flair just simply because his white blonde hair showed every piece of it. I mean, it was so prevalent. You've got dark hair and it doesn't show quite as much, or but Flair just he could completely turn
That's
redhead, and
it's probably you know that's probably a good way to pivot into how it is done. I mean, how did these guys, how do you cut yourself without everyone seeing you sit there and cut yourself? Sometimes if it was like Abdullah with the fork, it's obvious. He's
yeah,
actually using a fork, or barbed wire, or some of that stuff was real in order to bring the blood. But oftentimes what would happen is a wrestler would take what they'd call a gig, or, sometimes would be just a small razor blade, any sharp object really, and they'd hide it on themselves, in their wrist tape, in their knee pad, in their trunks, in their mouths. That was very common. Put it
yeah.
in their mouths, or hide it somewhere around the ring. And once your opponent would apply a distraction to the audience, the referee would be pulling him away or something, and the other guy's sitting there holding his head, or otherwise, it's the old magician's trick of using the assistant to provide a
Right.
distraction while the trick's going on in full view. And a lot of times you would catch it on camera. I mean, you would see that the camera was in the wrong spot, and you would see a guy sitting there just like carving up his
A lot
forehead.
easier to do too if you got longer hair, right?
And that's
And I
why,
always wondered, why do all wrestlers have long hair?
even after it went out of fashion,
Yeah,
wrestlers kept long hair. And like you pointed out, Ric Flair, blonde hair. Guess
yeah.
why? Dusty Rhodes, bleach blonde hair. It shows the blood.
Shows it.
We were talking a little bit prior to this. There was a reason why African American wrestlers and Samoan wrestlers, and you didn't see them blade nearly as much, because the blood did not show up as prominently on the pigment of their skin as
I
it
never
did
thought about
in
that,
lighter
right?
skin and lighter hair, which is why so many of those guys were bleach blondes. A lot of times they would take aspirin beforehand to thin the blood, to make it bleed easier,
Dangerous.
or before aspirin, the truly unhealth conscious, I guess if you're keeping the blade in your mouth, you're not overly health conscious about disease, but they drink beforehand, which
Yeah.
doesn't seem safe to put your life in the hands of someone who's had a couple beers before the show. But the alcohol would thin the blood, and again, as soon as they cut themselves, it would begin to bleed profusely. It also heals very quickly, which is another reason why the forehead's usually chosen. But over time, some of these older school wrestlers, if they're wrestling 4 or 5 shows a week and trying to get an extra $100 a night or something for bleeding, a Flair or Rhodes could, if you touch me or hit me in the right spot, it will just open back up again. So they would just keep the same cut sometimes for weeks at a time. You'd see them in the old school days, a lot of bandages and things that would last for, weeks and weeks on TV, because they would just repeatedly open it up. You just touch it in the right spot and they begin to blade, and they wouldn't necessarily have to always be cutting themselves over and again. Barbaric, I know,
It
but
is.
that is how it was done.
So the organizations that do it now, WWE, not so much.
Well, so that does bring us into the modern era. You're right, because WWE now, I mean, you had that period where ECW made it fashionable again. WWE followed suit through the Attitude Era, but then around, well, we'll go back to Ring of Honor, some of the importance of Ring of Honor. Nigel McGuinness, who was a world champion there, he contracted Hep C, and he was working for Ring of Honor behind this on screen at the time, not as a wrestler, but he believed that he had caught it back in his wrestling days from a dirty wrestling mat. Because a lot of times, by the time you ended up in the main event, there had been 10 guys that bled on that ring,
sure,
because
yeah.
it was that prominent back then. They didn't save it for one-offs. It was everybody was bleeding because they all wanted the extra money. And he believes that's how he got Hep C. So Ring of Honor, he was really instrumental in the push to have it banned as a practice. And in Ring of Honor, they did go away from it. Now, around the same time, this is early, we're talking early 2000s, in WWE, what was happening was Vince was trying to get respectable. So he was trying to go family friendly. He wanted advertisers that were staying away from this product. He wanted it to be PG. So in addition to AIDS and other bloodborne illnesses, those risks obviously are what they are. And Vince was having them, not really worry about that for the longest period of time. However, when he went PG, that changed everything in WWE. So they haven't bled since 2008. If they do, it's been on rare special occasions. They get special permissions. There's been those instances, but for the most part,
right? Sometimes there's an accident and they cut away real quick.
If you see it now,
you'll see a cut.
You'll see that a referee will begin to put on gloves. That's they handle like they do in boxing because of the dangers of blood. Is that the official will put on latex gloves, and oftentimes a medic will attempt to stop the bleeding if it's bad enough. They'll stop a match in order to stop the blood now, which of course for years wrestling fans have been trained that blood was just part of it, and now for sometimes some cut that doesn't look all that bad, they're actually stopping the contest. And this has been pretty much the edict in WWE since 2008. Impact banned the practice in 2014, so for a while there the sight of blood became rare in wrestling until, as you noted, it's back.
It's back, yeah. And so WWE.
Yes, they don't. They still have a policy against it.
AEW.
That's where things changed.
Yeah.
Honestly, AEW is they want to differentiate themselves from the competition, and one thing that you can do to differentiate yourself from the competition, if the other big guy doesn't offer blood and you do. That's one way you do it. Now, I don't know, is that AEW being rebellious, rogue promotion giving you the violence that the fans crave, or is it being irresponsible?
Well, I think that's what ECW was doing back in the day. They were giving you the violence that everyone was wanting.
They had a younger,
and AEW's doing the same thing now.
More oriented male audiences. Because you were asking me earlier,
about women, you don't see a lot of that, and
sexism, really. I mean, I don't know if that's the kind of area
maybe
where
we're
you
just smarter.
if that's the kind of area you want equality. But I mean, it goes back to where we're saying different races weren't asked to blade because of the visual aspect of it for the longest time, probably because of sexism. When women weren't treated as equals in the industry, you didn't have women bleed because who wants to see these dainty things who we are out there to parade around in bathing suits or bra and panty matches? We don't want to see them bleed. No one wants that. But of course now AEW has had, we saw one of the best matches of the year when Britt Baker took on Thunder Rosa, and they had a hardcore match, and they bled profusely.
Which was surprising.
It was.
Given her medical background,
it's true.
It's
DMD.
Maybe she's just very comfortable with the sight of blood, but still would think. The other thing that I would think too with women is that perhaps we're different in the sense of maybe thinking, if I contract something, then, in the future I could potentially pass this on to an unborn child, or, women are going to be thinking that way.
Well,
more so than men are probably going to be thinking.
They got, Brett actually, one of her largest selling T-shirts now is the T-shirt with her face on it, like completely covered in blood, because it showed, to her and to the women, they were being held finally in the same regard as the men. And that is, look how tough we are that we can put ourselves through that. And while it was shocking, because you just don't see that from the women. It did stand out, and it definitely added to that match to see the blood rolling down Britt Baker's face. It added drama to the proceedings. Whether that's right or wrong, it certainly did. And really, whether it's right or wrong, that's where AEW has that advantage, is that they can add that extra bit of drama, and it is something that they can hold over WWE. Now, Vince, of course, probably hypocritically considering how many decades he had to practice, but he refers to AEW as the blood and guts promotion because of some of that. And AEW being AEW and firing back, they kind of owned that, and even went and named one of their pay-per-views Blood and Guts because they just wanted to sort of take that power back away from him. But yeah, so where we're at today, you have blading returning to the mainstream, and you have one major promotion who doesn't use it, and one major promotion who does, and then a lot of the smaller promotions now following one or the other of those two big dogs that are leading the industry.
What are the smaller? What smaller promotions are following WWE?
Well,
In
Ring of Honor never brought blood back.
Okay.
Which now, well, there may not be a Ring of Honor
Sure,
after
right.
after the end of the year, despite their promise to return in April. So right now, you have a situation where the largest company in the wrestling landscape has had it outlawed for close to 15 years, and then you have the upstart, the cool, the shiny new toy, as we call it a lot of times around here, that others want to be. They're going back to the old school day of, look, we're tougher, and look what you'll see here that you won't see over there. And so you have some of the indies and things that are that were always doing the practice to differentiate themselves, continuing it, and now getting a mainstream platform for some of their guys to move off. The hardcore guys that maybe wouldn't have had a home after the demise of an ECW now have something they can shoot for. I mean, you got a John Moxley who's on top of the world here, who loves hardcore wrestling and pizza cutters and all the
Yeah.
violence of that, and he is bringing. He's participating in some of these blood and guts promotions, for lack of a better word, because he believes in that as its own style and art form that needs to be elevated. And now there's a national platform and not just a subculture that will do just that.
So what do you think the pros and cons are then? I mean, if you've got really the two biggest factions, I mean, I know that one still heavily kind of outweighs the other in terms of, um, you know, the longevity of it and so forth. But which side? What are the pros and cons to?
The the cons are, we mentioned a few of them. Obviously, health. I mean, you're not only jeopardizing the health of the performers, but back in the day when there we didn't know about AIDS or the risk of the bloodborne pathogens quite to the degree that we do now, they would fight out in the crowd. I mean, you swing your head one way, and some of these matches back in the day, if you go back and look at tapes at just how bloody wrestling used to be, you would get it on fans. And so the audience, the paying customers' health was also at risk, and you're putting the company now. Back then you're talking just renegade promoters, basically mobs. I mean, a lot of these were organized crime organizations as much as they were promotions, not Fortune 500 companies, which is what WWE is now,
Right.
where you don't want that kind of liability. Just look at the way Vince reacted to Mick's famous Hell in a Cell match. Like, that was one of the craziest things I ever saw. I don't ever want to see that on my broadcast again. You are liable. That is definitely a con to doing these sorts of things. Scarring, long-term scarring. You don't see modern wrestlers with the same kind of scars because they're not asked to do it to the same degree that the old school guys were. I watched I go back on the network sometime, a WWE network, and pull up, old things I remember from my childhood. And I can't remember, it was one of the first Starcades. I was doing them through, in order. And in match number one, both guys were bleeding. And then in the second match, they were bleeding. And you didn't see it on the TV, but here it is on one of their pay-per-views,
Right.
and almost every match had blood, to the point that it didn't mean a whole lot. By the time you got to the last match, that everyone had bled, but they were all bleeding. It was way more prevalent than I even remembered it being when you actually go back and look at some of those events, particularly the old NWA and things at the time. That's why those guys, Ivan Koloff and those guys, do have roadmaps. So that, yeah, the scarring risk, health risk to performers and audience members, and it's not worth overlooking that there's the whole concept of sadism. You are
Yeah.
asking an employee to, imagine any other line of work where you go in and say, and part of your job is, here's a razor, I need you to bleed for me, and yes, boss, and off you do it. So it is outside of the world of professional wrestling, kind of unthinkable that this actually occurs the way that it does. So yeah, those are definitely cons against why blading should be back in fashion.
To me, it seems like if you weigh those pros and cons, it's.
Oh, I didn't get into the pros.
Oh, did you have pros?
I
Are
actually
there
have
pros? Okay,
It,
tell me your pros.
I was maybe a 12-year-old who wanted to buy the magazine that had the blood, but it adds drama to the presentation. And maybe you could correctly argue that there might be a way to introduce fake blood that would look as real and have the same effect. But um, it definitely I think about classic matches like WrestleMania, Stone Cold Steve Austin refusing to give up to Bret Hart in the sharpshooter. The mental image of that match is Stone Cold with blood rolling down his face, off his nose, into his mouth, pulling up at the mat. Yes, it's gruesome, but I mean that's how tough he is that he is fighting through all of that and just passes out rather than gives up. The Britt Baker example from this past year, like the praise those women got for just what they put their bodies through, it makes it more realistic. Um, and truthfully, things like cage matches, Hell in the Cell, tables, ladders, chairs, first blood matches, chain matches, some of the things that have been used in wrestling history to really amp up the violence is to like, this is how we end a feud, and there will be blood, and people pay to see it. You have these matches now in WWE, and we have been so conditioned that you should be a bloody mess at the end of Hell in a Cell, and no one bleeds. It doesn't feel as violent. You promise violence, extreme rules, and all that, and nothing ends up being all that extreme about it. So there is an argument that can be made for why it enhances the wrestling product.
So, bottom line, then, what do you think? Because, I mean, I think that I myself think the cons outweigh the pros. The pros are completely self-serving to the business.
It is.
And
if you're asking me if it's a smart HR practice to have your employees
yeah,
bleeding all over each other, all over a referee, all over your audience members, and that if it happened here recently in AEW where Domino's Pizza, one of the main sponsors, actually complained because they were advertising Domino's Pizza during a commercial break in a match where Jon Moxley and Nick Cage were cutting each other open with pizza cutters. The pizza company didn't care so much for that.
What I would say about that is they need to not put advertisements in the middle of matches. I don't like that, period. But
that's true. But picture in picture, you can watch the pizza, and then
like
you can see the pizza cutter being used in the corner to carve up a man's forehead. I understand that maybe I am of an outdated mode of thinking, but obviously AEW, who are going for younger viewers, are finding success with this approach. But I think it does have a place. I think that many older wrestlers probably consider it a part of the business and a tradition. I'm sort of torn in a head versus heart way. My head knows that it's not safe. It shouldn't be done. Men or women shouldn't be cutting themselves, intentionally bleeding when it could go very wrong. Cut too deep goes very wrong. Hit an artery goes very wrong. There's lots of, Eddie Guerrero about bled to death on JBL. And I mean, there's a lot of instances where you go, yeah, it's just not worth the risk. However, I can't say that I enjoy the hardcore styles or the cage matches or the Hell in the Cells or anything any more as I did back in the old days when you knew that violence was going to occur and that this could be a potential outcome. I think it's a balance. I would be lying if I said that I didn't enjoy seeing it from time to time. Use sparingly. Disinfect the mats, the ringside area. Remove the canvas, which is something they do now at the end of matches where there's been blood. You don't have guys rolling around in the same blood for 10, 11 matches. But in the right moment and used sparingly, we get desensitized to things. And when there was blood all the time, it was too much the other way, and that it doesn't mean anything at all anymore. But yes, used sparingly and to add drama to the right feud. Guys shouldn't be just bleeding on Monday Night Raw. You should be bleeding at WrestleMania in a Hell in a Cell when you've been fighting a guy for a year and you haven't been able to solve it any other way, and there will be blood.
I think there's ways to tell the story without blood and without real blood. I mean, I don't think there's ever a responsible way to do it. I just there's too much. There's too many hands in the mix, and I mean that literally and figuratively. There's too much that can go wrong, but I think that you can tell a great story without having to tell blood. I mean, we have predetermined matches in a sports entertainment and wrestling style, and you can do it without the blood. Is it a spectacle when you see it?
It's a spectacle.
It is.
That is what it is.
But there's really not a responsible way to
And Doug
do
and I have
it.
actually talked here on the show before. Neither of us are a big fan of the hardcore style. It's not our preferred
No.
flavor. Like it's like the ice cream flavors. There's certain flavors I are my favorites, and others I like. When I get in the mood for them. On a week-to-week basis, I don't like hey, we're a hardcore promotion. All we do is just like go out here and carve one another up. That one gets old and it is irresponsible. But yeah, I'm probably still got that 12-year-old in me that if I saw the wrestling magazines and had to pick the one with the bloody cover and the one without the bloody cover, I'm like, man, Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Rich really hate each other. Look at all that blood. I'd still buy the one with the blood. So
Of course you would.
I would.
Of course.
What do you all think? I mean, AEW has brought it back into the mainstream. Are they doing the right thing? Is it responsible, irresponsible? In the comments on our Facebook or YouTube when you're watching this video, let us know. Bleed or not bleed? To bleed or not to bleed? That is the topic for tonight. And that is our main event. That is
Happy
our main event
Halloween.
topic.
That's
For
right.
Halloween, it was a perfect one.
All right. So, well, that was really interesting, and it was I think an educational history lesson for me because I didn't realize it went that far back. I didn't know it went all the way back to the 30s, and it doesn't surprise
In the
me.
Navy. It goes all the way back to the Navy. So
Doesn't
if you
surprise
don't believe
me.
in blading, blame the armed forces because you're not a real American because they're the
It doesn't surprise me that it still traces itself back to that circus mentality of come see the freak shows and
Yeah.
come see the freaks who bleed.
bleed for your entertainment.
So on to the big finish.
See, she watches
Yeah.
the show. She knows how we do it here. We have
That's
a
right.
big finish. First, big finish, botch of the week. I because it's Halloween, I'll do a Halloween themed botch of the week. I watched Escape the Undertaker. Have you all seen Escape the Undertaker? Also, let us know in the comments if you did, what you thought. And is it for you? Why am I putting it as botch of the week? Because, well, it was not really great. I wasn't a fan of the Boneyard match that so many people seem to like at WrestleMania. But if you want to know if this is for you, if you want some slightly only higher production values than the Boneyard match, but you want less wrestling and more Scooby-Doo, then Escape the Undertaker would be for you. If you want to see Big
one of
E
those-
try to get his soul back, yeah, it was.
Choose your own adventure type movies, right?
Yes, that's probably good to point out that if you're not aware of what I'm talking about with Escape the Undertaker, Netflix produced something in association with WWE where it is a choose your own adventure.
Yeah. They did,
Halloween
yeah.
special for Netflix. And honestly, if you had kids, I mean, it's not like it's violent in any way. Most of it's choice. I mean, we're talking fog and special effects and more hocus pocus than any actual violence. So if you do want, you have kids that want to experience the Scooby Doo side of WWE, it probably would be entertaining. For a 40-year old grown man to be watching it by himself, I question why I did so. Other than I can just say that it's for the folks at home, and I do it for this show. I would have watched it anyway, but it wasn't good. Watch of the week.
Zoinks.
Indeed.
All right, so on to the performance of the week.
Performance of the week. So I had actually had a couple here because I figured Doug would go one way and I'd go the other. I'll mention them both. I'll get the one that I was going to say because Doug always goes AEW, right? So Halloween Havoc. I know we all thought that Braun Breaker was going to walk away the NXT champion over Tommaso Ciampa. Instead, they went the other direction. Ciampa retained while every other title that night switched hands. MSK lost the tag team belts to Imperium. Gigi Dolan and JC Jane picked up the women's tag titles, and then in a bit of a surprise, Mandy Rose took the NXT women's belt away from Raquel Gonzalez. So Toxic Attraction had a really good night where all three women now hold gold. And it was a good show top to bottom. But yeah, I was going to say Toxic Attraction was my performer of the week. But then I see Dynamite, and I thought, Doug's going to talk about this one. But I have to say, Cody Rhodes this week fully turning heel by adamantly declaring with a crowd just booing him out of the place that he turns heel by basically saying, no, I'm not going to turn heel no matter what you all do, which of course just brings it. I mean, it was just sheer genius. And Cody, I think, has finally embraced the fact that, you can't be management for long and be the cool guy or
Yeah,
the guy that they want when there's other guys that they want over you. But yeah, best to lean into that. And Cody leaned into it to perfection this week.
that's great. That's awesome. That's yeah. That I'm trying to think of other times when somebody's and you see this with some people that you just they're wanting to go a certain direction, the crowd's taking them in another direction, and then they lean into it in a masterful way, and it really
It was almost a John
makes
Cena like, to be honest. John Cena does a
yeah,
bit of the patronizing thing that John Cena does, like, you all
right.
paid your money, and I don't care if you cheer or you boo, and of course that just makes boo.
No, that's even
Yeah,
worse.
and
Yeah.
but Cody took it next level because there really aren't any kids cheering him the way that John Cena has. It was just
Yes.
pure on boos, and him adamantly going, "I'm the good guy here." Actually, one line that came out that like, okay, it's okay to hate the guy that writes the checks, but don't forget the man who built the bank. I'm thinking, man, you
Wow.
want
Yeah.
to endear yourself to an audience, just lean into it that hard.
That's
But man,
good.
Cody's had some good stuff, and I look forward to see where they go with it.
Yeah. So, you have a match of the week this week that
Match of the week again. I expected Doug before he put on the John Cena outfit and went out to get candy would probably be talking about Bryan Danielson and Eddie Kingston on Rampage. Which yes, definitely go out of your way to see that match. Probably the match of the week, but pretty close to that. And another one I'm going to call out is the Raw main event from this past week. And you want to talk about the way you do it. Sometimes wrestling gets overcomplicated. You got bookers and writers and folks from other forms of entertainment coming into WWE or AEW, and they try to write these soap opera. Sometimes wrestling just needs to be simple. I want to say that I'm better than you, and I want the world championship. That is really wrestling 099 because it works. I mean, it's that when you're trying to,
yeah.
this is a real competition, right? We're trying to mimic real competition. That's what you want to be at the best. So you kick off Raw by having all these new guys who just came over from the draft come out in your opening segment and basically say, the only reason I'm here is I want that championship. I want to be a world champion, which is what all wrestlers should want to be, is world champion. And then by the end of the night, you put them in a ladder match for the opportunity to challenge for the world championship. Again, booking 099, but effective. And then they go out and have a pay-per-view worthy match with some really sick bumps and just, it was just great work by all involved. If you didn't see it, Seth Rollins, Rey Mysterio, Finn Balor, Kevin Owens had my match of the week. And it's good because the outcome ended up being Rollins winning. And so, Rollins taking on Big E. Big E's still early in his reign. Rollins is a main event type player already. Fresh matchup. These two have never really had issues before, so crowd's going to win on this one because we're going to get a good match from two guys we've never seen face off.
That's yeah, that's it's always good when you see those fantastic matches and they're on TV. I think they're having to step up their game. The competition always makes it
Oh yeah,
interesting. So, you can't just wait and put your big matches on your pay-per-views. It makes the in between matches and your weekly matches more interesting. And
particularly when AEW is putting on so many good ones.
yes, I mean, I think we've seen better matches on WWE because of that competition, and I just think that that's something Vince has always needed, is that he hates it, and he always wants to eat his competition alive. But honestly, if he could take a moment and realize that his competition actually always has made him better,
Definitely.
it's
And that's something we were talking about earlier in
you
this
see
show, and we
these
were talking about last
you
week.
see these strong matches like he would have held that match, for a pay per view.
And it's
In the
good that you
past,
do
but
have your pay-per-view match. You are holding. You're not hot shot booking. You didn't give away Big E versus Rollins. You had four guys who wanted to be the guy that would challenge Big E, and that is what you put on TV. And then you make them pay for Seth Rollins versus Big E. Again, Wrestling 099.
it's fantastic.
Even Doug could book this stuff. It's how
Even
simple
Doug.
it was. And with that, that is our big finish, and that is our show. Jerry, I can't thank you enough. Truly my better half in everything in life, and filling in tonight for Doug. It's been a pleasure having you.
Apologies for the coughing.
That's
He lives with me, so you understand,
some.
Cough is always
Well, it's a Halloween
that
show,
time
so
of
we
day.
give you blood and we give you phlegm. So we
Yeah.
we just all the gore tonight. Ooh. But next week, hopefully Doug will be back. If again they didn't figure out his costume and he landed himself in jail for violating the order for being around children. But if he can, he'll be back because next week we are going to be previewing Double or Nothing, which again, if we're previewing a Double or Nothing, pay-per-view, I imagine that Doug will probably try to call in, even if it's his one phone call, that he will be hopefully joining us next week. But that is next Sunday at 8 o'clock live. Until then, folks. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.